So, Shelly Johnson, thank you for joining our panel on cinematography. We're going to talk to you today about a really exciting World War II picture, Greyhound. And first, I just got to ask you about even before filming began. So, my understanding is you had your Millennium DXL2, but you were waiting on those Sphero 65 lenses. And they got there only a couple of days before filming began. What was your contingency plan?
I sort of didn't have one. I mean, long before, I think my contingency was to shoot anamorphic. I had actually talked to the director, Aaron Schneider, about possibly shooting the film in 4:3 format, more of a combat type of format. And he wanted widescreen and he wanted a large format. And he had an interesting reason for it. Because of he wanted less distortion on the faces, and he wanted fall off in the background, and he wanted the characters to kind of to pop out. Since we were going to be so close to them and everything was handheld, he wanted the flattest and less distortive yet expressive optics. And so I wanted the Sphero 65 because they're old. And what I found was that they're a marvelous kind of pairing with this modern camera, because the modern camera separates the colors in a very technical and somewhat surgical manner, and the lenses kind of meld the colors back together. And that combination of having that initial separation and that optical remelding of colors is a lot of what gives that movie its the presence that it has, that combination.
Yeah, and so Aaron actually started as a cinematographer, and he did. This, I think, is his second feature. So what's that like to collaborate with somebody who understands your language intimately? I mean, gets what you...
Yeah, it was wonderful. It worked, I think, the best way it possibly could. He did the opposite of second guessing anything I was doing, and in fact had a real understanding of everything I needed to go through when it comes to making a World War II movie in the set in the open ocean. When you're on stage, there's a lot of details that need to come into play, and there's a lot of kind of focus on the story. In that very technical, almost visual effects environment, it's important to stay focused on the characters and give the shot the proper amount of flaws and that character that it needs. And plus, I think the way that Tom Hanks wrote the script, it was written in a very kind of technical manner. When you read the dialogue, you're reading a lot of target bearings and rudder commands and things like that. And what the scene is about is really the spaces between the words. It's kind of the white part of the page is where the story was. And so working with Aaron was interesting, because after rehearsals, we'd speak, and between us, we had a whole narrative piece together just based on what we saw. So much of the film had to be interpreted based on what the actors were doing. And I love that, because that narrative needed to be expressed visually. It wasn't there in the words. So that all had to be, emphasized visually.
And I think what's so interesting is, I mean, Aaron wanted you to understand the language they were using. Didn't even ask you to learn a little bit about sonar tracking?
Yeah, he did. On our first meeting, he said, "Okay, here's what I want my DP to do. I want you to learn about how sonar works. How does their surface radar work? How does the destroyer itself work? What kind of sea? How does it respond to different kinds of seas?" And his reasoning was, because the film was written in such a procedural manner, that he knew that a lot of the storytelling had to do with teaching the audience how the ship works, so that they had an awareness of the situation, the same as the characters. And after a period of time, would begin to know what the characters were talking about when they said, whatever, hard over 30 degrees, they knew what that meant, and that they were in trouble. And so I got that education by going on to the USS Kidd, which is a museum ship that's moored in the Mississippi River. And their docents and volunteers took me through that ship, and I think I know every square inch of that ship, and showed me all about how it worked and how the combat information center plots an attack, and it was marvelous. It was great to learn.
So that was sort of your exterior, the USS Kidd, right? You shot on the ship, but then the main sets. I mean, I was reading about the pilot house. So it's 10 by 18 feet. The set. You got a dozen people crammed in there. I mean, how do you set up your shots when you're working within those confines? I mean, that's just 180 square feet.
Everybody squeezes in there. Yeah, and a lot of the times they're wearing their K-pop vests. Which is actually good for us. We shot the whole movie handheld. We were on a gimbal. So everything we shot interior on that pilot house was on stage, and even much of everything on the upper decks was on stage. It's when you're on the main deck with the sailors running around, and for the burial at sea, I was on the ship. Obviously, the very wide shots are the ship, but probably 75% of the movie is on that set. And we all just squeezed in together. I mean, under a normal circumstance, the ship's crew may have 12, 14 people in that small space, plus everything we needed. And it was a lot of working with the actors. They were wonderful. They were so accommodating and very much helped us, get the camera where we needed. And it was just really about collaboration is what made it happen,
But I think what was amazing, you said that was on a gimbal, but the secondary set, the command center, wasn't. But your two camera operators were working in such incredible sync that even though one was simulating the waves with the gimbal, the other was able to do that with the camera. That's extraordinary.
It's very true. Yeah. The gimbal, the wave motion, Aaron had figured out by animating a ship on sea in Maya, and sort of figuring out the math of it all. And our gimbal movement was sort of based on that math. And I was familiar with what the cycle of the movement was. And we could feel it on the gimbal. But where that really became noticeable is when we had one camera on the gimbal and the second camera shooting simultaneously in the CIC that was just on the stage floor. And like you're saying, those operators had it in their muscle memory exactly, what that motion was. And I mean, those two monitors were side by side and they were locked in. It was just incredible.
And then I think also what was incredible I found was finding out that all those ocean vistas, the battle scenes, all of that's visual effects. So how do you prepare for that? This idea that you're going to, so much of what is happening outside isn't seen. Like I know, for instance, you used a white screen rather than a green screen.
Right.
And yeah.
I mean, for me, what it was about was conceiving what that final shot would look like. So I went through the whole script, and Tom had written the script with a series of 4-hour watches. When the ship's crew comes on and off, they come on and off for 4 hours at a time. So each of these watches could have a different look. They were at a set time of day, and it's a 3-day journey across the Atlantic. So I gave my two dusks and my two dawns two very different looks. They were traveling through stormy weather through much of it, but I would define, the color of the water, the visibility of the horizon, the amount of atmosphere in the air, the difference between the exposure outside and the exposure inside, the general color of the clouds and character of the clouds. I wrote all that down so that I could light to extend into these backgrounds. Then later on, when visual effects was involved, they were kind of wondering how things fit together, and really all I had to do was pull out this document that I made in prep, which was a thick document that was the whole movie laid out, day, night, everything, and so they just followed that plan, and their backgrounds were able to drop right in according to what we did in the foreground, and it was great. The white screen was there to give us light all around. When you light with a green screen, sometimes the image can have a bit of a Hollywood edge to it because you have to light around the screen itself when really the light should be coming from where the screen is located. So with a white screen, we could bring the light from that, and you get the audience appreciates that, I think, with all the intangibles. I mean, they get all the reflections where they should be, off the gauges and off the officers' insignias and their belt buckles and all of those immeasurable places where light wouldn't be if a green screen were there, but is there, and makes it look real. And anything we can do to, put that audience next to that captain, we were going to do. And that was one of them. And So that was it helped us greatly in establishing a color on stage that the VFX could see, and it gave them a key right away as to what the backgrounds were doing.
Yeah, well, it was really, I mean, visually so appealing. And I know you use the lighting a lot of times for the weapons firing and the hits and things. It was so ingenious. Well, listen, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you later with the rest of the group.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.